On a deserted street at midnight, Henry Thompson found her a female cop lying motionless on the pavement, barely breathing. When her eyes fluttered open and recognized his face, terror filled them. Not fear of death, fear of him. She whispered 3 words that changed everything: "Don't call police." In a city where one wrong phone call could destroy a black man's entire life, Henry understood the stakes. If he helped her, he could lose everything, especially Felix, his 8-year-old daughter. But if he walked away, what lesson would he teach his child about right and wrong? Henry Thompson had spent 10 years learning how to become invisible. He kept his head down. He worked his shifts. He came home to his daughter. That was the deal he made with a world that had already taken too much from him. The night security job at Henderson Industrial Warehouse paid $17 an hour, not enough to save, but enough to keep Felix fed, clothed, and enrolled in a decent school on the other side of town. The commute ate into his sleep, but Henry never complained. Complaints attracted attention, and attention was something a black man in this city could not afford. His shift ended at 11:45. By midnight, Henry was driving his 12-year-old Honda Civic through the empty streets of the industrial district, windows cracked to let the autumn air keep him awake. The radio played low an old soul station that reminded him of his mother's kitchen back when life made sense. That morning before his shift, Henry had picked up Felix from her grandmother's house. Ruth Washington, his late wife's mother, had been keeping Felix while Henry worked nights for the past 3 years, ever since cancer took Angela. Ruth never asked for money. She said watching Felix was the only thing keeping her connected to her daughter's memory. Over breakfast, Felix had looked up from her cereal with those big brown eyes that saw too much for an 8-year-old. "Daddy, we learned about Rosa Parks today." Henry smiled, pouring himself coffee. "Yeah. What did you learn?" "She didn't give up her seat because it was wrong, even though she could get in trouble." Felix stirred her cereal thoughtfully. "Daddy, if you saw someone doing something bad, would you say something? Even if it was dangerous?" The question hit Henry like a punch to the chest. He thought about Darnell, his younger brother, 22 years old, forever, lying on a sidewalk with 3 bullets in his back because he'd been holding a cell phone that a cop mistook for a gun. No charges filed, no apology given, just another black body added to the statistics. Henry had said something back then. He'd shouted at press conferences, demanded investigations, organized marches, and what had it gotten him? His face on a police watch list, his job applications mysteriously rejected. His life slowly strangled until he learned the only lesson America wanted to teach him: silence equals survival. "Sometimes staying quiet keeps you safe, baby girl," Henry had told Felix that morning, hating every word as it left his mouth. Felix's face had fallen with disappointment she was too young to hide. "But Mrs. Patterson says silence is what lets bad things keep happening." Henry had no answer for that. He kissed her forehead and told her to finish her cereal. Now, driving through the darkness 12 hours later, her words still echoed in his mind. The streets were empty except for the occasional homeless figure huddled in doorways. This part of town had been dying for decades. Factories closed, jobs gone. Hope evaporated. The people who remained were the ones who couldn't afford to leave. Henry turned onto Riverside Drive, a shortcut through the warehouse district that shaved 5 minutes off his commute. The streetlights here were sparse, half of them broken or burned out. City maintenance didn't prioritize neighborhoods where nobody important lived. That's when he saw her. At first, Henry thought it was a pile of discarded clothes. His headlights swept across the alley entrance, and something reflected back metal, catching the light. He slowed instinctively, his brain trying to process what his eyes were reporting. A body. A woman's body sprawled against a dumpster, with one arm extended toward the street, as if reaching for help that never came. Every instinct Henry had developed over the past decade screamed at him to keep driving. This wasn't his business. This wasn't his problem. In this city, stopping to help could cost a black man his freedom, his future, his life. But then, he saw the blood. Henry pulled over before his conscious mind made the decision. His hands were already putting the car in park, his legs already carrying him toward the alley. 8 years as an Army combat medic in Afghanistan had wired certain responses into his nervous system that no amount of civilian caution could override. The woman was in her mid-30s, wearing dark clothing, tactical pants, a fitted jacket. Her breathing was shallow and rapid, her skin clammy with shock. A gunshot wound to the abdomen still seeping through the makeshift pressure she'd tried to apply with her own hands. Defensive bruises on her forearms. Someone had beaten her before shooting her. Henry knelt beside her, his training taking over. Airway clear. Breathing compromised but present. Circulation failing, she'd lost too much blood. He needed to stop the bleeding, needed to get her to a hospital, needed to his hand brushed against cold metal at her hip. A badge. Henry froze. The streetlight caught the silver shield, and he read the words embossed across its surface, City Police Department. Every nerve in his body screamed retreat. A white cop bleeding out in an alley and a black man kneeling over her body, he knew exactly how this story would end. It had ended the same way for Darnell, for Trayvon, for Eric, for George, for countless others whose names never made the news. He should run. He should disappear into the night and pretend he never saw anything. No one would ever know. But the woman's eyes fluttered open. She looked up at Henry, and in the dim light he watched recognition dawn on her face, followed immediately by terror. Not the terror of someone dying, but the terror of someone who understood exactly what she was seeing. A black man alone in a dark alley with her blood on his hands. "Please," she whispered, and Henry couldn't tell if she was begging for her life or begging him to leave. "I'm not going to hurt you," Henry said, keeping his voice calm and steady the way he used to speak to wounded soldiers. "I'm going to help you, but you need to stay still. You've lost a lot of blood." The woman's hand shot out and grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. Her eyes were wild, desperate. "Don't," she gasped. "Don't call them." Henry frowned. "You need an ambulance. You need a hospital." "No." The word came out as a wet cough. "No cops. They did this. My own people did this." The revelation should have shocked Henry, but somehow it didn't. Somehow, on a level deeper than conscious thought, he had always known that the rot in this city's police department went further than a few bad apples. "Who?" he asked. "Who did this to you?" The woman's grip on his wrist tightened. Her eyes found his, and in them Henry saw something. He recognized the look of someone who had seen too much truth to ever go back to comfortable lies. "Jackson," she breathed. "Lieutenant Jackson, I found evidence. Corruption drugs. Murders made to look like self-defense. He found out. Sent his guys to make me disappear." Her head lolled to the side, consciousness slipping away. Henry caught her, cradling her head to keep her airway open. "Hey, stay with me. What's your name? Talk to me." "Kali," she managed. "Kali. Reyes. Badge number 4721. Remember that." Then her eyes rolled back, and she went limp in his arms. Henry knelt there in the alley holding an unconscious cop who had just told him that other cops tried to kill her. His mind raced through his options, each one worse than the last. Option 1, call 911. Paramedics arrive with police escort. Henry becomes the prime suspect, a black man found with a wounded white female officer. Even if he isn't arrested on the spot, his face ends up in police databases, his name on reports, his life under scrutiny. And if what Kali said was true, the same cops who tried to kill her would make sure Henry never lived to tell anyone what she'd told him. Option 2, leave her. Walk away. Drive home. Pretend this never happened. Kali dies in this alley. Her evidence dies with her, and Henry gets to keep his quiet, invisible life. He gets to keep Felix. The thought of his daughter made his chest ache. Felix with her Rosa Parks questions and her eyes that saw too much. Felix, who would grow up in a world where cops killed people like Uncle Darnell and no one ever paid the price. Felix, who would someday look at her father and ask why he never did anything to make things better. What would he tell her that he found a woman dying in an alley and walked away because helping was too dangerous? That he let someone else's daughter die because he was afraid? Henry looked down at Kali Reyes, at her pale face and shallow breathing, at the badge that represented everything he had learned to fear. 10 years ago, cops had murdered his brother. Tonight, cops had tried to murder one of their own. The same system, the same rot, the same disease eating the city from the inside out. If Kali died, the truth died with her. The corruption continued. The murders continued. And someday, maybe 10 years from now, maybe 20, another young black man would be gunned down for holding a cell phone, and no one would ever know why. Henry thought about his daughter's question from that morning. If you saw someone doing something bad, would you say something? Even if it was dangerous, he had lied to her. He had told her that silence kept you safe. But Darnell had been silent. Darnell had been walking home from work, minding his own business, doing everything right. And Darnell was still dead. Silence didn't protect anyone. It just made it easier for the people with power to keep killing the people without it. Henry made his decision. He stripped off his jacket and pressed it firmly against Kali's wound, applying steady pressure. Then he lifted her carefully, supporting her head and spine the way he'd been trained, and carried her to his car. As he laid her across the back seat, Kali's eyes opened briefly. She looked up at him with confusion and fading consciousness. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you helping me?" Henry buckled her in as securely as he could manage, his jaw tight. "Because my brother died on a sidewalk 10 years ago," he said quietly, "and nobody stopped to help him. I'm not going to be that person. I can't be that person. Not anymore." Kali's eyes closed again. Henry shut the door and climbed into the driver's seat. He didn't know where he was going. He didn't have a plan. He only knew that he had just made a choice that would change everything, a choice that could cost him his job, his freedom, his life. A choice that could cost him Felix. But as he pulled away from the alley and drove into the darkness, Henry Thompson felt something he hadn't felt in 10 years, the terrifying, exhilarating weight of doing the right thing, no matter the cost. Henry drove through the back streets, avoiding main roads and traffic cameras. His combat training kicked in automatically evasive routes, minimal exposure, constant awareness of his surroundings. In the rearview mirror, Kali Reyes lay unconscious across the back seat, her breathing growing more labored with each passing minute. He couldn't take her to a hospital. The moment he walked through those doors carrying a wounded cop, his life would be over. But if he didn't get her medical help soon, she would die in his car, and everything she knew about Lieutenant Jackson and his corrupt network would die with her. Henry pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found a name he hadn't called in years, Gloria Hayes. Dr. Gloria Hayes had been a fixture in Henry's neighborhood since before he was born. She'd delivered half the children on their block-treated gunshot wounds without asking questions and provided care to people who couldn't afford insurance or couldn't risk hospital records. 5 years ago, the medical board had revoked her license over a paperwork violation that everyone knew was retaliation for her testimony against a pharmaceutical company. Now she ran an unofficial clinic out of her basement serving the community that the healthcare system had abandoned. Gloria answered on the third ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Who's calling at this hour?" "Doc, it's Henry Thompson, Lydia Thompson's son." A sharp intake of breath. "Henry boy, I haven't heard from you since your mama's funeral. What's wrong?" "I need your help. I've got someone with a gunshot wound to the abdomen. She's lost a lot of blood, and I can't take her to a hospital." The line went quiet for a moment. When Gloria spoke again, her voice had shifted into professional mode. "How long ago was she shot?" "I don't know. I found her maybe 40 minutes ago. She was conscious briefly, but she's been out since then." "Bring her to me. You remember where I live?" "Yes, ma'am." "Use the back entrance. And Henry, Whatever trouble you're in, you better be sure it's worth it." Henry wasn't sure of anything anymore, but he drove anyway. Gloria's house sat at the end of a quiet street in a neighborhood that had seen better days. Henry pulled into the narrow alley behind her property and killed the engine. Within seconds, the back door opened, and Gloria emerged, a small, wiry black woman in her 70s, with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen every kind of human suffering. She took one look at Collie and started issuing orders. "Get her inside. Basement. Now." Henry carried Collie down the narrow stairs into Gloria's makeshift clinic. The basement had been converted into a surprisingly well-equipped medical space, with a surgical table, IV stands, monitoring equipment, and cabinets full of supplies. Henry laid Collie on the table, and Gloria immediately went to work. "Gunshot wound close range," Gloria muttered, cutting away Collie's jacket. "Entry wound in the lower left quadrant. No exit wound, bullets still in there." She glanced up at Henry. "This woman's a cop." It wasn't a question. "Yes. And you brought her here instead of calling 911 because cops did this to her. She told me before she passed out. Said a Lieutenant Jackson tried to have her killed because she found evidence of corruption." Gloria's hands never stopped moving, but her expression darkened. "Jackson. I know that name. He's been running this city's drug trade for years, using his badge as cover. Everyone in the community knows it, but nobody can prove it, and nobody who tries lives long enough to testify." She inserted an IV line into Collie's arm and hung a bag of saline. "The bullet needs to come out tonight or infection will set in. I have the tools, but it's going to be rough. She'll need at least 2 days of rest before she can even sit up properly." Gloria worked through the night. Henry assisted where he could, holding instruments, applying pressure, following orders. By dawn, the bullet was out, the wound was sutured, and Collie was stable, weak but alive. "She's lucky," Gloria said, washing the blood from her hands. "Another hour and she would have been gone." Henry slumped into a chair, exhaustion finally catching up with him. "What now?" Gloria fixed him with a hard stare. "Now you understand what you've done bringing her here. You've put a target on both our backs. If Jackson finds out she's alive, he'll come for her. And he'll come for anyone who helped her." Henry understood. He'd understood the moment he pulled over on Riverside Drive. But understanding didn't make the choice any easier. "I couldn't leave her there to die." Gloria's expression softened slightly. "No, you couldn't. You're too much like your mother." She pulled out her phone and started scrolling through contacts. "I know a journalist, Rebecca Torres from Channel 7. She's been investigating police corruption for years, but she's never had solid evidence. If your cop friend has what she says she has, Rebecca might be our insurance policy." Henry frowned. "Insurance? If something happens to us, the story still gets out. And if Jackson knows the press is watching, he might think twice before making us disappear." Gloria found the number and sent a quick text message. "I'm telling her to be ready, just in case." Henry nodded slowly. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was something. He called Ruth to tell her he'd be delayed picking up Felix, a work emergency. He lied, hating how easily the deception came. Then he sat in Gloria's kitchen and waited for Kaylee to wake up. 2 days passed. Kaylee drifted in and out of consciousness, her body fighting to recover from blood loss and surgery. Gloria monitored her condition around the clock, adjusting medications, changing bandages, doing everything possible with limited resources. On the morning of the 3rd day, Collie finally opened her eyes and stayed awake. Henry was dozing in a chair beside her bed when her voice cut through his exhaustion. "Where am I?" He jerked awake to find her staring at him with those same suspicious eyes from the alley. In the harsh light of Gloria's basement, she looked pale and fragile, but her gaze was sharp. Her right hand was reaching toward her hip, searching for a weapon that wasn't there. "You're safe," Henry said, keeping his voice calm. "You're in a private clinic. My name is Henry Thompson. I found you in that alley 3 nights ago and brought you here." Kaylee's eyes darted around the room, taking in the medical equipment. The IV in her arm, the basement windows covered with blackout curtains. Her body was tense, ready to fight, despite her condition. "Why?" The word came out harsh, accusatory. "Why would you help me? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." "You're right, I don't." Henry leaned forward in his chair. "But you told me something that night right before you passed out. You said your own people did this to you. You said Jackson tried to have you killed because you found evidence." Kaylee's face went pale. "I don't remember telling you that. You also told me your name and badge number. Kali Reyes, 4721. You wanted someone to know in case you didn't make it." Kali closed her eyes, and for a moment, Henry saw the mask slip, saw the exhaustion and fear beneath her defensive armor. When she opened them again, there was something different in her gaze. Not trust, not yet, but recognition. "You could have left me there," she said quietly. "Most people would have. Most people didn't watch their brother bleed out on a sidewalk while nobody stopped to help." The words hung in the air between them. Kaylee studied Henry's face, searching for something deception, ulterior motives, the catch that surely must be hiding somewhere. "Your brother, Darnell Thompson, 22 years old, shot 3 times in the back by police officers who claimed he was reaching for a weapon. He was holding his cell phone." Henry kept his voice steady, but each word cost him something. "That was 10 years ago. No charges were ever filed. The officers involved got paid administrative leave and then returned to duty." Kali was silent for a long moment. "I'm sorry. So am I." Henry stood up. "The doctor says you need rest. There's food upstairs when you're ready. We can talk more later." He was almost to the stairs when Kali's voice stopped him. "Thompson. The name in the file. I've seen it before." Henry turned back. "What file?" Kali's eyes met his, and in them he saw something that made his blood run cold. "Jackson's file. The evidence I collected. There's a list of cases shootings ruled as justified self-defense that weren't. Cover-ups, murders disguised as police work." She swallowed hard. "There's a case from 10 years ago. A young black man shot while reaching for his phone. The report was falsified. The officers were told exactly what to say." The whole thing was orchestrated. The basement seemed to tilt beneath Henry's feet. "What are you telling me?" "Your brother didn't die because of a mistake. He died because he witnessed something he wasn't supposed to see. A drug deal between Jackson's crew and a local distributor. They killed him to keep him quiet, then fabricated evidence to make it look like a justified shooting." Henry gripped the stair railing so hard his knuckles went white. 10 years. 10 years of grief, rage, and helpless acceptance. 10 years of telling himself that Darnell's death was a tragic accident, a systemic failure, a consequence of living while black in America. He had buried his anger and his activism because he believed fighting wouldn't bring Darnell back. But this wasn't an accident. This was murder, and the men who killed his brother were still wearing badges. "Show me," Henry said, his voice barely a whisper. "Show me everything you have." Over the next 2 days, Kali told Henry everything. The evidence was stored on a flash drive hidden in Kali's apartment, financial records, internal communications, witness statements she had gathered over 2 years of secret investigation. Jackson's network involved at least 6 officers, including 2 sergeants and a captain. They controlled drug distribution in 3 districts, took protection money from dealers, and eliminated anyone who threatened their operation. Kali had joined the police force 8 years ago, following in her father's footsteps. Her father had been a good cop, one of the few who had refused to participate in Jackson's schemes. He'd been forced into early retirement and had died 6 months later in a car accident that was never properly investigated. Kali had spent years building her case, working alone because she didn't know who she could trust. "I was supposed to meet with a federal contact last week," she told Henry. "Someone outside the local system who could take my evidence to the DOJ. But Jackson found out. I don't know how. Someone must have talked." Henry listened to everything, his mind racing. If Kaylee's evidence was real and everything she'd shown him suggested it was then exposing, Jackson could bring down the entire corrupt network. It could bring justice for Darnell and countless others who had been killed, framed, or silenced. But it could also get them both killed. On the fifth night since Henry had found Kaylee, the news broke. Henry watched the press conference on Gloria's small kitchen television, his stomach twisting with dread. A police spokesperson stood at a podium flanked by officers in dress uniforms, announcing that Officer Kaylee Reyes had been reported missing. Evidence suggested she had been abducted from her vehicle. The department was pursuing all leads, and they were asking the public for information. Then they released the suspect description: black male, 35 to 40 years old, medium build, last seen driving a dark-colored sedan. "They're framing you," Kali said from the doorway. She had made it up the stairs on her own, though she was still weak, one hand braced against the wall for support. Henry didn't respond. He was staring at the television, watching his life collapse in real time. His phone buzzed. A text from Ruth Police came asking about you. What's going on? Then another message, this one from an unknown number. We know where you are. We know about the girl. Come in quietly and nothing happens to her. Henry's blood turned to ice. Felix. He called Ruth immediately. Ruth, listen to me. Take Felix and go to your sister's house in Baltimore, right now, tonight. Henry, what is happening? The police said you're involved in a kidnapping. It's a lie. All of it. I'll explain everything later, but right now I need you to take Felix somewhere safe. Please, Ruth. For Angela's sake. The line went quiet. Then Ruth's voice steadied despite her fear. I'll keep her safe. But Henry, whatever you're doing, you be careful. That little girl needs her daddy. I know. I know she does. He hung up and turned to find Gloria and Kaylee both watching him. They know where I am, he said. They're threatening my daughter. Gloria's face hardened. Then we need to move. Tonight. She grabbed her phone. I'm calling Rebecca Torres now. If we're going to run, we need someone on the outside who knows the truth. Gloria made the call while Henry helped Kali prepare to move. Within minutes, Gloria had Rebecca on the line explaining everything in rapid, urgent sentences. The journalist agreed to stay alert to monitor police channels to be ready to broadcast if anything happened, but they were too late. The sound of tires on gravel cut through the silence. Then another vehicle, and another. Henry ran to the window and peered through a gap in the curtains. Police cars were surrounding the house. Armed officers were taking positions in the yard. Back door, Gloria said, already moving. There's a way through the neighbor's property. The front door exploded inward. Henry grabbed Kali and ran. They made it through the kitchen, through the back door, into the narrow alley behind the house. Behind them, Henry heard shouting, heard Gloria's voice raised in protest, heard the sounds of a house being torn apart. They ran through the darkness, ducking between buildings, climbing fences, moving on instinct and adrenaline. Kali's wound had reopened. Henry could feel warm blood seeping through her bandages. She was slowing down her strength, failing. They emerged into a dead-end alley, brick walls on three sides, no way out, footsteps behind them. Henry turned to see a figure walking calmly toward them, backlit by the distant glow of streetlights. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a police uniform with lieutenant's bars on his collar. He reached up and switched off the body camera, mounted on his chest. Henry Thompson. Lieutenant Jackson said, his voice pleasant, almost conversational. You've been a busy man. Henry stepped in front of Kali, shielding her with his body. Let her go. She needs medical attention. Jackson laughed. She needs to disappear, just like she was supposed to 5 nights ago, just like your brother did 10 years ago. The words hit Henry like bullets. Hearing it confirmed, hearing this man admit so casually to Darnell's murder, something inside Henry shifted. Fear gave way to rage. You killed him! I ordered it done. There's a difference. Jackson drew his weapon, a service pistol that gleamed in the dim light. Your brother saw something he shouldn't have. just like Officer Reyes here, just like you." He aimed the gun at Henry's chest. "The story writes itself, really. Kidnapper killed while resisting arrest. His hostage dies of her injuries. Tragic all around. The department will give me a medal." Henry stared down the barrel of the gun, thinking of Felix, thinking of Darnell, thinking of all the people who had died in alleys just like this one, their stories erased before they could be told. "You can kill us," Henry said quietly, "but you can't kill the truth." Jackson smiled. "Watch me." His finger tightened on the trigger. Headlights flooded the alley. A car screeched to a halt at the entrance, and a woman jumped out with a phone held high, its camera light blinking red. "Lieutenant Jackson," the woman shouted. "Rebecca Torres, Channel 7 News. I'm live streaming to 40,000 viewers right now. Would you like to explain why you're pointing a weapon at an unarmed civilian?" Jackson's head snapped toward the camera. For a fraction of a second, his composure cracked. Henry saw the calculation in his eyes, the rapid assessment of a man whose carefully constructed world was suddenly exposed. "This is a police operation," Jackson said, his voice strained. "You're interfering with what?" Rebecca stepped closer, her phone steady despite the tension radiating through the alley. "The arrest of a kidnapping suspect because the woman standing behind him looks a lot like Officer Kali Reyes, who your department claims was abducted 5 nights ago." The live stream comments were exploding. Henry could see them scrolling on the edge of Rebecca's screen, thousands of people watching in real time, thousands of witnesses that Jackson couldn't silence. Kaylee stepped out from behind Henry, her hand pressed against her bleeding wound, her face pale but determined. "My name is Kali Reyes," she said directly into the camera. "Badge number 4721. I was not kidnapped. I was shot and left for dead by officers under Lieutenant Jackson's command because I discovered evidence of corruption, drug trafficking, and murder within this department. The man standing beside me saved my life. He is not a criminal. He is a witness." Jackson's gun was still raised, but his hand had begun to tremble. Behind him, Henry could hear more sirens approaching, other officers responding to the scene officers who might or might not be part of Jackson's network. "Put the gun down, Lieutenant," Rebecca said. "The whole world is watching." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Jackson lowered his weapon. 3 weeks later, Henry sat in a federal courthouse, watching the aftermath of that night unfold in slow, grinding legal proceedings. The FBI had taken over the investigation within 48 hours of Rebecca's livestream going viral. Kali's evidence recovered from her apartment with federal supervision had proven even more damaging than she'd described. Financial records, communications, witness statements dating back over a decade. Jackson was arrested along with 4 other officers. The charges included drug trafficking, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and 3 counts of murder, including Darnell Thompson. But justice, Henry learned, was never clean. 2 senior officials connected to Jackson's network, a captain and a deputy chief, were allowed to retire quietly with full pensions. The department claimed insufficient evidence for prosecution, though everyone knew the real reason: they had enough political connections to make a trial inconvenient. The case involving Darnell was reopened, but the prosecutor warned Henry not to expect too much. 10 years had passed. Evidence had degraded. Witnesses had disappeared or died. The best they could hope for was an official acknowledgement that the original investigation had been compromised, a formal admission that Darnell Thompson had been murdered, not killed in a justified shooting. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. Gloria Hayes was released from custody after 48 hours, all charges dropped in exchange for her testimony. But the damage was done. Her underground clinic was shut down, her medical supplies confiscated, her reputation further tarnished. She told Henry she didn't regret any of it, that helping people who needed help was worth any price. But he saw the weariness in her eyes, the weight of a lifetime spent fighting a system that refused to change. Henry lost his job at Henderson Industrial Warehouse. The official reason was excessive absences. But he knew the truth. No company wanted to employ the man whose face had been plastered across every news channel in the country, the man who had exposed police corruption and made powerful enemies. For weeks, he applied to every security firm, every warehouse, every factory within 50 miles. The rejections came in various forms: polite emails, unreturned calls, interviews that ended the moment they recognized his name. Kali Reyes was placed on administrative leave pending an internal review. 6 weeks later, she was quietly informed that her position had been eliminated due to budget constraints. She filed an appeal, knowing it would go nowhere. The department couldn't fire her outright. She was too visible, too protected by public attention, but they could make her life impossible until she left on her own. She started working with a civilian oversight organization, using her knowledge of police procedures to help families navigate complaints against officers. The pay was almost nothing. The hours were brutal. But for the first time in her career, Kaylee told Henry she felt like she was actually making a difference. The harassment started 2 months after the trial began. Anonymous phone calls at all hours, slashed tires, a brick through Ruth's window with a note that said "snitch" in block letters. Some of it came from Jackson's remaining supporters in the department. Some came from people in the community who believed that exposing police corruption made everyone less safe. Ruth decided she couldn't stay in the city any longer. She moved to Baltimore to live with her sister, taking with her the last physical connection Henry had to Angela's memory. Henry and Felix moved to a smaller apartment on the other side of town in a neighborhood where nobody knew their names. The rent was cheaper, the schools were worse, and the walls were thin enough to hear every argument and television show from the neighbors on either side. Felix never complained. She helped pack boxes, helped carry furniture, helped organize their new cramped living room with the same quiet determination she'd inherited from her mother. One evening, 3 months after the move, Henry sat with his daughter on the concrete steps outside their building. The sun was setting over the rooftops, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. From inside the apartment, the muffled sound of a television news broadcast drifted through the open window. Something about Jackson's upcoming trial date. Felix leaned against her father's shoulder, her small body warm against his side. "Daddy, do you ever wish you didn't stop that night?" Henry looked down at his daughter, at her serious eyes, her thoughtful expression, the way she always asked the questions that mattered most. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Sometimes I think about how much easier things would be if I had just kept driving. We'd still have our old apartment. I'd still have my job. Grandma Ruth would still be close by." Felix nodded, slowly processing this. But then that lady would have died, and nobody would know about what happened to Uncle Darnell. That's right. So you did the right thing. Henry thought about all the ways that statement could be true and false at the same time. He thought about Darnell, who would never come back no matter how many people were arrested. He thought about Gloria, who had sacrificed everything to help a stranger. He thought about Kali, who had spent years trying to change a system from within, only to be crushed by it anyway. Doing the right thing hadn't made anything easy. It hadn't fixed the world or brought back the dead or guaranteed a happy ending. All it had done was give Henry the ability to look at himself in the mirror without flinching. "Do you remember what you asked me that morning?" Henry said. "About Rosa Parks, and whether you should speak up when you see something wrong?" Felix's eyes widened. "You remember that? I think about it every day." Henry put his arm around his daughter and pulled her close. "I gave you a bad answer that morning. I told you that staying quiet keeps you safe. But I was wrong. Staying quiet just makes it easier for bad people to keep doing bad things. It doesn't protect anyone. It just spreads the hurt around until everyone is carrying a piece of it." Felix was quiet for a moment, her brow furrowed in concentration. "So what's the right answer?" Henry looked out at the fading sunset at the city that had taken so much from him and given so little back. "Doing the right thing isn't always safe," he said slowly. "It doesn't always work out the way you hope. Sometimes it costs you more than you ever thought you'd have to pay. But it's still necessary. Because if nobody stands up, nothing ever changes. And I don't want you to grow up in a world where nobody is brave enough to stand up." Felix considered this with the gravity of a child who had seen more than any 8-year-old should. "I'm proud of you, Daddy," she said finally. "Even if everything is harder now, I'm still proud." Henry felt something loosen in his chest, some knot of doubt and regret that had been tightening since that night on Riverside Drive. He kissed the top of his daughter's head. "Come on," he said, standing up and offering her his hand. "Let's go get some ice cream." Felix grinned and took his hand. Together, they walked down the cracked sidewalk past the tired buildings and flickering streetlights toward the small shop on the corner that sold soft serve for $2 a cone. Behind them, the television announcer's voice faded into the evening air. Something about justice and accountability and change. Ahead of them, the last rays of sunlight stretched across the pavement like a path leading somewhere new. Henry's story reminds us that doing the right thing rarely comes with applause or rewards. Sometimes it costs everything. But every act of courage, no matter how small, plants a seed for a better world. If this story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever faced a moment where doing the right thing meant risking something important to you? Or maybe you've witnessed someone else's quiet act of bravery that inspired you. Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you want more stories like this one, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Thank you for being here. It means more than you know.